We're diving into something kind of wild and honestly a bit sobering. We are going to look at the stark reality of how some of the most severe offenses in history resulted in exactly zero proportional legal consequences. I'm really thrilled to guide you through this because we're going to look closely at the data and the historical records to understand exactly how this happens.
We all generally assume that the severity of a crime guarantees an equally severe punishment, right? It just makes sense. But as the historical records are going to show us today, the justice system is something that can sometimes be navigated, bypassed, or even just completely outlasted.
Starting off with Section 1, Wealth and Elite Power. Take a look at this. Back in 2012, a U.S. Senate probe dropped a complete bombshell. It revealed that HSBC ignored warnings and allowed Mexican cartels to launder hundreds of millions of dollars, alongside processing transactions for sanctioned countries like Iran. So what was the consequence for all of that? A $1.9 billion fine. But here's the kicker. Absolutely zero executives were charged. Federal officials essentially suggested that prosecuting the bank could destabilize global finance. It's where we really saw the phrase "too big to jail" come into play. The bank paid the fine, and the executives, they literally just kept their jobs.
Now, to put a human cost on this kind of corporate immunity, just look at this number, 500,000. That is the staggering amount of opioid overdose deaths since 1999. It's an epidemic that was ignited by Purdue Pharma's highly aggressive marketing of OxyContin. Yet, despite the company pleading guilty to criminal charges twice, the Sackler family, the people who actually owned it, were never charged. Instead, between 2008 and 2018, they quietly moved over $10 billion overseas. And by filing for bankruptcy in 2019, they shielded themselves from lawsuits. Ultimately, they reached a $7.4 billion settlement for 2025, all while keeping a personal net worth between $6 and $8 billion. Zero family members went to prison, not one.
And if you're wondering about the mindset at the top, well, it's chilling. This is a quote from Richard Sackler, who ran the company for years. In internal emails, he referred to the very people dying from his product as reckless criminals. It just goes to show how entirely impenetrable that corporate shield really was.
Okay, this next one is incredibly grim, but it's absolutely crucial for understanding how wealth warps the system, especially regarding the abuse of vulnerable kids. The FBI found 36 underage victims of Jeffrey Epstein, some as young as 14, and they prepared over 50 charges. But Epstein's immense wealth bought him a deeply, deeply unjust deal back in 2008. He got just 13 months in county jail, and get this, a 12-hour daily work release to his private office. Crucially, this sweetheart deal immunized his accomplices, meaning of the at least 10 people the FBI said helped him, only one was ever actually charged. It wasn't until a 2018 Miami Herald exposed that massive public pressure finally led to his rearrest in 2019. 1 month later, while facing 45 years, he was found dead in his cell. Astonishingly, the guards who were supposed to check on him had fallen asleep, and the cameras had completely failed.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Shield of Fame.
It is just a tragic reality that fame can act like an absolute force field for monstrous abuse. Jimmy Savile is the textbook example. He built this incredibly powerful facade. He was a beloved BBC host, he was knighted by the Queen, and he raised £40 million for charity. This massive public adoration gave him totally unchallenged access to hospitals, schools, and studios. But behind all of that, a post-death investigation revealed a horrifying truth. He abused over 450 highly vulnerable victims over the course of 50 years. Complaints started popping up in the 1960s, but they were tragically ignored by bosses and police who just refused to connect the dots. Because his public image was so untouchable, Savile completely evaded the justice system. He died peacefully in his bed at 84 before any of the truth came to light.
Let's look at another case where someone held immense power in the entertainment industry, Sean Combs. In late 2023, following surfaced allegations in a leaked 2016 surveillance video of him violently assaulting Cassie Ventura, the horrifying scope of his actions really began to emerge. By 2024, he was arrested for running an operation involving coerced and forced encounters he referred to as freak-offs. Despite over 120 accusers stepping forward to detail severe abuse, the outcome was highly controversial. After an 8-week trial where the defense called no witnesses, a jury found him not guilty on the most serious charges. Prosecutors had asked for 11 years. The judge gave him just 4 years and 2 months. And shortly after, it was confirmed he had actually requested a pardon from Donald Trump.
Now, perhaps literally no trial in American history exemplifies the power of celebrity and wealth better than the 1994 O.J. Simpson case. Following the brutal stabbing deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, Simpson fled in a white Bronco. We're talking 95 million people watching this chase live. He had a gun, a fake beard, and $8,000 in cash. But during the trial, his lawyers successfully argued that racist police planted the evidence. They really leaned into the infamous moment the bloody glove didn't appear to fit his hand. And it worked. The jury acquitted him in less than 4 hours. Now, a civil court did later find him responsible, ordering him to pay $33.5 million to the victims' families. But Simpson just moved to Florida, where laws protected his assets, and he avoided paying almost all of it until his death in 2024.
So cases like Simpson's force us to ask a really tough, pivotal question. What actually happens when the very rules designed to ensure a fair trial become the ultimate shield for the guilty?
That brings us perfectly to Section 3, Flaws in the System.
At the absolute core of this structural flaw is something called double jeopardy. In the U.S., it's an ironclad legal rule. It prevents the government from trying a person twice for the exact same crime after they've already been acquitted. While it's obviously designed to prevent the government from just endlessly harassing people, it can have some staggering unintended consequences when a trial's outcome is deeply flawed.
There is honestly no more heartbreaking example of this rule's consequence than the 1955 murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till down in Mississippi. After Carolyn Bryant accused him of whistling at her, Roy Bryan and J.W. Millam brutally beat and killed him. They had a 5-day trial with an all-white, all-male jury, and those men were acquitted in just 67 minutes. Because of the absolute protection of double jeopardy, those two men literally turned around and openly sold their detailed confession to a magazine for $4,000. Despite reopening the case multiple times over the decades, the government permanently closed it in 2021. The passage of time and the laws of 1955 left them with zero legal recourse.
And the sheer scale of deception that can still lead to a controversial verdict is mind-boggling. Take the Casey Anthony case from 2008. She waited 31 entire days to report her 2-year-old daughter Kaylee missing. She invented a fake nanny, and she even led detectives on a completely fake tour of Universal Studios where she claimed she worked. When Kaylee's remains were eventually found with duct tape, prosecutors sought the death penalty for suffocation. But, after just 11 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted Anthony of murder. They only convicted her of lying to police. So, because of double jeopardy, she was released after time served and is permanently protected from a retrial no matter how much public scrutiny she faces.
Then in 2012, we have the tragic case of George Zimmerman and 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman was acting as a neighborhood watch volunteer and was explicitly told by a 911 dispatcher not to follow the teenager. But he followed him anyway. That led to a confrontation where Zimmerman shot the unarmed teenager in the chest. At the trial, Zimmerman's defense relied heavily on Florida's Stand Your Ground law, claiming he feared for his life. After a 16-hour deliberation, the jury found him not guilty of second-degree murder and manslaughter. The Department of Justice later investigated the whole thing but declined to file civil rights charges, which left Zimmerman completely clear of any conviction.
Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Ghosts and Cold Cases.
Sometimes perpetrators simply vanish into time. Look at the infamous KFC murders in Texas back in 1983, where 5 people were brutally shot. The path to finding these killers was a total maze of dead ends. They had a false arrest in 1995, and it actually took until 2007 for DNA technology to link 2 cousins to the crime. But even then, DNA from one of the victims didn't match either of those men. It wasn't until the year 2025, we're talking 42 years after the crime, that advanced testing finally matched the blood to a 3rd man, Devin Riggs. But the scales of justice could never reach him because Riggs had already died in 2010. He spent his entire life successfully hiding right in plain sight. But the ultimate ghost? For sure it's the Zodiac Killer. Between 1968 and 1969, he murdered 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area, constantly taunting police with letters and 4 highly complex coded messages. And in a staggering missed opportunity, police actually drove right past a white man walking away from a crime scene simply because a dispatcher had incorrectly reported the suspect as a black man. The Zodiac totally disappeared by 1974. While codebreakers did manage to solve a 51-year-old cipher in 2020, 2 of his codes still remain unsolved today. And despite having over 2,500 suspects, the Zodiac's true identity was never found.
So, when we zoom out and look at all of this, the billions of dollars hiding corporate negligence, the sheer force field of fame, the rigid technicalities of the courtroom, and the deafening silence of cold cases, it really forces us to question the very foundation of our legal system. Is true justice an absolute rule, or is it merely an exception for those who lack the means to exploit it? Keep seeking the facts, and thanks for watching.